Perched high and remote from the workaday world is a long-time Virginia tradition, Mountain Lake Hotel, located in Giles County, not far from Blacksburg. Many Virginians know of Mountain Lake, but most have never been to the rustic retreat. We visited there ourselves this week for the first time with Channel 7's photographer Jerry Bartmus and had the good fortune to interview not only manager Bob Gray, but a remarkable lady from Galveston, Texas. She is Mary Moody Northen, a native of Texas, a Virginian by heritage, and the owner not only of a chain of hotels, but specifically Mountain Lake, which she visits annually. We talked to this philanthropist businesswoman just as she was preparing to leave after her 1968 visit, and chatted with her not only about her following in the stead of her father, the late William Lewis Moody, Jr., as head of a host of industries across the country, but to the point today about her love and memories of Mountain Lake over the years. Northen, you're in kind of a unique position to be able to fill in some of the history of Mountain Lake for us, but I think the fact that you're a Texan come to Virginian is an unusual story in itself. How is it that you and your father, being Texans, found Mountain Lake here in Giles County, Virginia, and came here so regularly?
Well, he was a very small boy and attending Hollins College, and Mr. Billy Pleasance brought him up here first on a fishing trip when he was quite young, either 9 or 10 years of age.
Well, now back up a little bit. How did your father get to go to a girls' school?
Well, Mr. Pleasance and my grandfather were very close friends at the University of Virginia, and my father was quite frail and felt that a colder climate would be beneficial for his health and consented to take my father, well, I suppose as a member of his family.
And so he was actually a student at the age of 9 and 10 years old.
Yes, he was there 3 years.
So then after he had the fishing trip up here, he never forgot it.
Never forgot it and loved it his entire life.
Well, then he went back to Texas, and you were born and grew up there. When did you start coming up here to Mountain Lake as a visitor?
Well, actually, I can't remember. I think I was just an infant probably when I first came.
And you've been coming every summer ever since?
Not every summer, but almost every summer.
You remember back to the days when you couldn't drive up here. How did you get to the top of the mountain?
Well, we came up in old hacks. Some were 2-seated, some were 3-seated, drawn by horses, and we had to walk every step of the way and change teams midway up, and it was an all-day trip just up the mountain.
And everybody brought trunks instead of suitcases.
Oh, my, yes.
Well, when you came, then you planned to stay for some lengthy visit. It wasn't just a weekend drop in and drop out.
No, not with after the trip up the mountain and all the luggage. Why, people would stay much longer. It often, well, several weeks or a month, and sometimes all summer.
Well, what would you do up here? It seems so far removed from every place there could be, and there weren't radios and television sets as there are now. What did you do for entertainment?
Oh, we had wonderful times. Of course, we loved to hike, ride horseback, go out on the lake rowing and fishing, and some would swim. And then we danced and had played games of various kinds.
Well, now, dancing was more than just the Saturday night affair that it is today. What all did you do back in the good old days?
Well, we danced at least every night, and sometimes in the afternoon. Always had the Paul Jones and the Virginia Reel. And then a little bit later, why, we did lots of square dancing, which was lots of fun and quite colorful, too.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about the lake itself. There's been another myth that you might help us with, and that is that the lake can, when you go down to the middle, you can look down and see trees in the middle of the lake, which would seem to mean that it hasn't been here for very long. If it had filled in and there would still be trees there. Is that true?
Well, I've heard that story many times, but there have not been any trees that were visible in many, many years, if ever, really.
I wanted to ask you also about the lake itself that we're sitting here looking down on. Does anybody know how deep it is, or how big, or how wide?
Well, I think it's approximately 3/4 of a mile long and about perhaps a little more than 1/4 of a mile wide. and it's very, very deep in just beyond the center. I don't know exactly, but approximately 100 feet deep anyway.
How long have people been able to play golf up here? We understand there's a small golf course just above us. Has that been since the beginning, or has that been put in recently?
No, ever since I remember. I don't know just who first put it way up there on the mountain, but I imagine it's one of the higher altitude golf courses there is.
We see signs all the way around about horses and horseback riding. Has that been a tradition here?
Oh, yes. For many years we've ridden horseback.
And you rode yourself?
Oh, yes, I had my own horse for many years, a Palomino that my father sent up from Texas for me.
Did he take to our eastern ways and the eastern saddles?
Oh, no. We still had the western saddle. But he was always so gentle and reliable, and when other horses wouldn't go places, why, they'd ask me to lead because he would always go. But I often wonder what that horse thought in the change from the Texas up here. He'd never seen snow before.
I expect that there are a good many bridle paths close at hand.
Oh, lots of lovely ones. And through the woods and with the rhododendron in bloom. It's a wonderful sight.
Mr. Bob Gray is the manager up here at Mountain Lake, and I was telling him just before we started this film that I was surprised, really amazed that there were so many people and so much activity going on up here after Labor Day. Is that usual?
Well, yes. We're open until October, the first week in October.
How much of a season do you have? When do you begin and when do you...
May the 1st to October the 10th.
Close down. Do you find that your guests are mostly Virginians, or do they come from all over?
Come from all over. We had a very good participation from Ohio this year. Columbus and Cincinnati were very good areas. Charleston, West Virginia. And quite a few from Washington, D.C. areas, but for the most part, Virginians rather.
Well, we notice how much cooler it is up here. Is there any kind of an average year-round, or does it stay cooler, say 10 degrees more than...
Usually 10 to 20 degrees cooler than in the lower areas, like Roanoke, for instance.
Yeah. Well, Mrs. Northen's been telling us of some of the activities from when she remembers as a girl. What do you do for entertainment up here now?
Well, there's just about anything that you would want to do for entertainment. We have a golf course and a tennis court and a large lake, which we stock with trout each year, boating, swimming. We have pool tables and ping pong. And during our summer season, July and August, we have nightly entertainment, movies, and bingo games, dances for the guests. And so they're kept very busy.
I even noticed a television set up here for those who don't want to really get away from it all, that there's some kind of modern convenience from that standpoint. Would you say that people come for great lengths of time, or is it a short trip vacation that they find up here?
It will vary. For the most part, people aren't staying as long as they used to because of the transportation angle, but for the most part we have anywhere from 3 to 10 days stay.
Very fine. Thank you, Mr. Gray. I'd be able to clear up something for us. We understand that the building, the hotel that is here now, is not the first hotel that's been here, but there was a wooden building before, and a lot of people think that it burned down. Is that what happened?
Oh, definitely not. It was very old. We have no idea how old, but anyway, it was put together with wooden pegs and hand-hewn lumber. And we were told that it was a stagecoach route to White Sulphur. And then, after many years, why, they were afraid that it might be a fire hazard, and so it was removed and this hotel built.
Well, now, it was your father who did that. He had since become the owner of the Mountain Lake property, and he made that decision. Could you tell us, was it because of fear of fire?
Yes. He feared might be some tragedy, and he did not want to happen, and so he thought it should be replaced with something more fireproof.
Well, I suppose that was a pretty well-founded fear because you didn't have electricity. You used lanterns for light up here then.
It's old kerosene lamps. in those days, and many people would not be familiar with using them, and they would use them for all sorts of purposes, even to dry their bathing suits after a swim or after they'd been caught by rain on a hike. And so I thought, though, that it was the most fireproof hotel in the United States, as it hadn't burned so many years before.
We notice that there are many, many cabins surrounding us as we sit here in the steps of the old hotel. And there's a history to some of these, too. We understand that a very famous writer used to come up here in summers and do some of his writing.
Yes, Mr. James Branch Cabell did much of his work up here. And he had a cabin up on high on the hill with a beautiful view of the valley from it. And then there were others who wrote also. Miss Edna Turpin, who wrote many children's books, came here regularly. And many other people, Mr. John Powell of Richmond, who was, I believe, quite a concert pianist, used to come, and many artists used to paint pictures up here and draw.
And many a poem has been written about this place, too,
Oh,
simply
my,
because
yes.
of the beauty. How old would you say, or how long has there been buildings up here? Do you have any idea when the first one was put up?
Have no idea at all. I think, as far as we could learn, that the earliest one was in about 1851, but how long there'd been one here before that, we just don't know.
Well, the lake was actually discovered 100 years before that by a surveyor of some kind.
Yes,
it was
in about the middle 18th century.
We don't know exactly how to pronounce his name. We know how to spell it, though.
Yes, Christopher, either Gist or Gist.
G-I-S-T.
I described it just as it seems to be now.
We are very much curious and interested in knowing a little bit. We've been talking about your father, and we never have said his name.
He was William Lewis Moody, Jr.
And he had a great many interests all over the country, really, and got seriously interested in hotels.
Yes.
And so the mountain lake was not his only
Oh, no,
love.
He had quite a chain of hotels.
This is the one that he chose himself to spend his summers.
Yes. Well, the others were not just resort places as this, but many that we are very fond of and still have.
I think the story of how he surprised your mother with an unexpected present would be fun to tell.
Well, we dearly loved the place, and it was rather crude in the early days, and he wanted to build a cottage here so that we might be more comfortable. And my mother did not want a cottage because she felt that she wanted a vacation also and not the care of one. So he did not build one for several years, but finally did without our knowledge, and we had quite a surprise when we came up and the cottage was all completed, even to flowers in the vases. But he did arrange that it would be open before we came and closed when we left, and the hotel help kept it, and we had our meals at the hotel, and she loved it from then on and always came.
Well, now, what is the relationship to the cabins that surround us to the hotel? Are they part of the property?
Oh, yes.
And
many were privately owned in the early days.
That was the instance with James Branch Cabell.
Yes.
He owned his own.
Yes, but they were built on the hotel property with the understanding that after so many years they would revert to the hotel, and they all have long since now, and no private ones have been permitted to be built since, so the hotel owns all the cabins.
We think it's very interesting that there seems to be a close relationship between the people from Texas and the people in Virginia. I wonder if there is any explanation for that, but there does seem to be a kinship in a manner of speaking.
Yes, so many went to Texas from Virginia. In fact, many years ago, there were so many alumni of the University of Virginia that they formed an alumni association there in Galveston.
Your people, way back when, originally did come from Virginia, and so did your
The
husband.
majority of my ancestors did. Some came directly from Virginia to Texas, and a few drifted down to some of the older states first and then to Texas.
But even so, you are what now, third generation Galvestonian? Is that such a word?
Yes,
Is that what you call yourself?
yes.
And relative to in Houston?
Well, yes, I'm the fourth generation, but that is on my mother's side, if I lived in Houston.
I see.
But I've lived in Galveston my entire life.
Well, Mary Moody Northen, we love having you in Virginia, so we hope you'll continue your treks back here to Mountain Lake every summer.
Well, thank you so much. I'm sure I will as long as possible because I dearly love the state, and I thought for many, many years I knew more about Virginia than I did Texas.